Welcome to the Lift Your Story podcast with guest Chelle Johnson, career resilience consultant and strategist. Hi, everyone. I'm Lorianne. I am that gal from Milton, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
In this episode, we welcome Chelle Johnson, as she's a career resilience consultant and strategist. Thank you so much for being here with us.
Yeah.
It's awesome to be with you, Roy and Lorianne. I am in Denver.
Yep. Okay, cool.
Nice. Beautiful area.
Yes, definitely outdoorsy and love my four seasons.
Yeah, we have seasons here too, hot and cold.
Well, I'm originally from Arizona. We had sometimes two seasons. So Colorado is definitely my jam.
Yeah, it is for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Okay, so in your bio, it says you grew up with limiting beliefs, fear, and dysfunction. Through faith and resilience and grit and determination, you moved on. So can you tell us a little bit about your A to B transition there?
Mm-hmm. So that's in my bio because I grew up where both my parents were entrepreneurs. My father is from the Deep South and my mom is from Europe. So the limiting beliefs that I grew up with are, girls aren't good enough. They're not smart enough to do math. We don't really focus on diversity and inclusion in our family. And everything I just said, like those were limiting beliefs in my heart. I never believed that. And, I had to go through a lot, and I was the first person in my family to graduate from college, first person to speak another language, first person to go internationally, and have the grit to quiet that inner critic and those beliefs that no longer served me. And I did that through faith. I went to church by myself at like 15, and I was involved in a youth group, and I'm really lucky I never went down the wrong path. Well, maybe I did a couple times, but I got back on the right path. And then I went to college. I lived in Spain for a year and really focused on cultural diversity and inclusion. And in my career now, I've spent over 20 years as a talent acquisition and human resources leader for top Fortune 50 companies like Comcast, Honeywell, and Lockheed Martin. And I recently just started my own business, which talk about limiting beliefs and grit and faith. You kind of have to jump in all at the same time and get over that future events appearing real, that fear. And so I think that's where I've really had to look at my mental fitness, meaning my mental strength to get over self-imposed obstacles that have allowed me to really build my business and tell my story with pride.
That's interesting. Just quickly, I was brought up with a little bit different, where my father always said, women can make it, women can make it. But what he didn't do was set me up for when I finally got into that world and was competing with men. And it's a whole different world. And sorry, Roy, but it really is when you're,
It's a really different Roy. It's like way different.
It's so different. And Roy does know this because he has dealt with women in that. But the thing is that I wasn't ready for it because I grew up where my father was a believer. He had 4 daughters, but he always told us, get out there, you can do it, you can compete against them. But when I got out there, the thing is I didn't have the direction on how to do it, which was scary. So then I realized going, oh, men are really like, they're not like my dad. They're not. Most of them are not. So it was kind of weird. So go ahead. Sorry, I had to open that one.
No, that's all good. Roy, go ahead.
No, because when I first started in my career, the women that were involved, guys went out of their way to make it harder and tougher on them. They didn't want the women in there. 20 years later, we started having women engineers, women architects, designers and stuff. And so, they would go to these meetings on these jobs and they'd be the only woman there and, 15 or 25 guys, and I'm sure it was hard for them, but I'll tell you this: I've been in some meetings where guys kind of talked down to them, and it didn't take them long to set them in their place. You know.
That's good. That's because they had the intestinal fortitude and the chutzpah to speak up for themselves.
Mhm.
And, I have been a director at Fortune 50 companies, and I'm very lucky that I was surrounded by very smart engineers and supply chain and just leaders
Mhm.
that did promote that inclusivity. But part of that grit and the independence, where I went by myself to live in Japan for 2 years, and I went by myself to live in Spain, and I've traveled alone as a woman. It's just, I have the confidence. My father instilled that in me, absolutely, and so did my mom. I had great parents. It's just some of the beliefs were a bit antiquated with how the how the country has evolved, or maybe how I have evolved. So, that I don't really like. I had great parents, so I think we all have that inner child within us that if that record plays and those limiting beliefs define who we are, I mean, we leave so much money on the table. We leave part of our self not out there. And so I actually now work with a lot of executive women who still feel that their voice is not heard. They feel disassociated or stuck in a toxic work environment, or that bruh culture is still there. And so we really work from the inside out to build that voice. And so that inner critic and those negative thoughts really are quieted, so that my clients can live in a life where it's much more from a positive. You navigate it in a different way. You pause, you are explore through curiosity, and there's some courageous vulnerability, as Brene Brown would say.
Mhm. It's interesting you mentioned that because we've had guests on before. They speak to that in their careers. Hey, I got to this point, I wasn't taken seriously. I was ignored in meetings. My voice didn't matter, and how hard it was for them to overcome that.
It's very difficult to overcome. And, I've only been in business a year, but I recently put together this framework of exactly how I've been able to help people do that. And I'm talking like chief people officers, head of product management, etc. And I just started a community of high achieving women that are going through an 8-week program with me, that it gets really real, like very vulnerable in our safe space, where they know that they have an accountability partner. So you have to be, one, willing to be coachable. You two have to have a vision of where you want your life to go, and you have to dig deep and work at it. If you're not consistent and you don't do something deliberately every single day, that mindset, that survival brain of negativity and those limiting beliefs are going to continue to run your life. But if you can break that habit and that way of thinking, it really is unbelievable. I've had over 30 people go through my program, including, you mind if I tell you a story?
No,
Go
hell,
for it.
no,
That's what we
no, not at
want.
all.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I have a client who is very high up in the Army, and he, in 2020, is in Afghanistan. And he was under a lot of stress, like an immense amount of stress. His wife, his 3 kids are at home on their own. COVID is happening. Things are getting worse in South Afghanistan. And just some limiting beliefs came up for him. He went through my program. He and I would talk at 4 a.m. Afghanistan time. And just by focusing and working on some questions, he was able to get through in 8 weeks, limiting his stress, feeling better about the burnouts, and that effect that had on the troops, ripple effect. I mean, I can't make this stuff up, Roy and Lorianne. I just cannot make it up. So if an Army officer in Afghanistan during COVID can feel better, then I challenge anyone out there who has the limiting belief that they can't, to say to them, that inner critic is hijacking and sabotaging you.
I like
Yeah.
that. You're absolutely right. The inner critic. And we are more critical of ourselves than anybody else is
Yeah.
of us. And that's the hardest gremlin to fight.
And I think Lorianne, when she first started her career, she struggled with some of that, didn't you, Lorianne?
Yeah. It wasn't too bad, interestingly enough, quickly, but I started with a literary agency. It was fine. But ultimately, and it's, how do I say it? I don't mean to down my ex-husband, but he was very powerful and he was very demanding. And then I started, and I had to let go of my business to go and follow his because, financially that made more sense. But then I just started to feel like this. Then we come back, and then I started getting to the Chamber of Commerce where it was a man's world. And then I had to argue that one. And I don't think they really liked a young woman, moving up on the VP side of everything. So there were those arguments with myself, as you're saying, limiting beliefs. But I was intimidated by the bro the bro code, the bro man, the thing, because you just felt like you were just like there and they were here and left out. And that's a tough one to argue. And when you're saying hearing your voice, oh, I voiced myself easily, but it was like that sometimes they decided they didn't want to listen to it and they just went into their little community and that was it, right?
Yeah.
That
So
makes sense.
you help those women in your group, right, Shelley?
I do, but I want to give props to our men out there. I want to give props to those men that have really turned the corner. And we all have these ancestral beliefs, the way we were brought up, the culture, the community, the locale. And so many, I have been able to break through the glass ceiling because I had proponents who were global men. And, so it's really based on that confidence, the collaboration, the credibility, all these C words that I'm coming up with. But I want to give credit across the globe to those men that have, because women are not going anywhere. COVID, women had the biggest impact. The economic impact for women, I just heard, was $800 billion, and women are employed at the level that they were in 1988. And so think about who our frontline workers are. Think about who takes care of the children most of the time. I have to give props to my husband. He was a stay-at-home dad for 5 years, right? I have been blessed. And so I just want to give those men out there props. But it still is, there's the old boy network, there's the bro culture. And, why is it okay for men to be seen, oh, it's okay to be assertive, but when women are assertive, they're seen as bitchy, So a lot of these things come up. Roy, getting back to this group that I just started it June 1st. We have 8 very high achieving, successful women. Some of them own their own business. Some of them are consultants and high level big 4. A few of them are, so they're high level. They've done the homeschooling, they've done it. Just because they have big titles does not mean they have big confidence.
Mm-hmm.
Just because they have big responsibilities, it's going back to those limiting beliefs. You're not enough. The conversation we had last night was, I'm not good enough. Why would anybody want to hear me? Why would my opinion matter? And especially women in technology, 75% are men, and they're either Asian men or white men. I'm just stating facts. And in those cultures, we really do have to learn. And I think the dialogue is changing where talent and diversity programs have been popular on a programmatic perspective across different timelines. I think, and I hope I'm not getting too personal or political here, but I really hope and do think that BIPOC voices are starting to be heard. And what I mean by that is Black, Indigenous, people of color. The systemic processes are breaking little by little and slowly.
At least they're breaking. There's progress.
There's progress. Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that Canadian accent. Progress.
Program, yeah, yeah,
Progress, I guess is what you
Yeah.
say.
No, honey,
Progress.
it's
I
progress.
don't know. And I love what you're saying too, though, because I mean, I argued it right the way through. I went through whatever challenges I had to get through, and they go, it makes you stronger. But I think that there's still always that humility and almost intimidation of men having like I believe that I don't think that I never felt that I wasn't good enough, but I felt intimidation.
Yes. Oh
And
my
I
God.
find that to be two very different things because I knew what I was doing, but then I get intimidated, particularly if they're in a group. It's like being, the rabbit in a wolf's den. It's like, so, I mean, I'm better now, but it was a tough journey. And I know that my daughter's even talks to that because she's in engineering and she's the only, I think there's only like, I don't know, maybe 2 women in like 100. And she's realizing what I was telling her. I said, it's not always easy. You can sometimes feel intimidated. With that saying, the millennials are coming through, and I think that there's a lot more working with the genders and such that are working a lot better together, but it's still intimidating.
Well, on the reverse side of that, think about when the guys started going into nursing. Because I
Exactly.
know, some guys, and they were kind of like, oh man, really? What are you doing here, kind of deal. I mean, so it goes both ways, but I think it is more male to female.
Absolutely. But you're right about the nursing because then people will say, well, why can't you be a doctor? Because that's what they
Yeah,
expect of a
yeah,
guy. And why are you picking nursing instead of a
yeah,
doctor? Yeah, I get
yeah.
that.
Of course, now you see there's tons of male nurses.
Oh, tons. Oh my gosh, tons. Medical laboratory scientists, phlebotomists, there's more male teachers, there's more stay-at-home fathers.
Hmm.
There's more of people just living for what works for them. And really what gets in the way is judgment.
Right, exactly.
Judgment of yourself, judgment of others or of circumstances, and having expectations that you put on yourself or that you put on others. I mean, what if we could just go through life with just acceptance?
Yeah,
I like that
True,
very much.
true acceptance. Because acceptance, I mean, and this is a whole nother part of my life, but I have family members that are part of 12-step recovery programs. And they talk about acceptance is really, if you're not in acceptance of yourself, a situation or a person or a thing, that's what's creating your unhappiness. And it's really just about learning about other people and kind of accepting where they are without judgment. I mean, that's why people are drawn to me to work with me or be in my circle of trust or hope or in my community, is because it's just about letting people be.
Yes.
it's funny because when I was a kid in the early '60s, that's right from the '50s to the '60s. In the '50s, I can remember if a woman worked, the husband was considered a failure.
Yeah.
Everybody oh well, she's got to work. That guy, he's nothing. Go moving into the '60s, more women were going to work, but they were starting to be accepted. It was slow. It was real slow. But in the '50s, if a woman worked, the husband was looked down on. I mean, they just were ostracized.
It's very true.
It's very true. So think about the cultural, ancestral, organizational changes since then and what technology's brought. But it really goes back to very simple, what is that limiting belief? What is that inner critic? Because that inner critic causes you or me to judge others. And then that judgment is what creates the ripple effect of issues.
Mhm.
I mean, it's really simple of I can either accept what's in front of me and know that the universe meant for that to happen, and maybe I'm not successful with XYZ, and maybe that's the lesson I mean, I know it sounds Pollyanna and maybe a little woo-woo, but it really comes back to acceptance of who you are, empathy for yourself, empathy for others, and acceptance, true, of like just letting people be.
What's Wrong with Pollyanna? I love that movie. It's one of my favorite ones.
Tatiana's good, right? Yeah.
And people tell
Kind
me
of
I'm
like
too
too
nice,
long talking or with
right?
that hair. Yeah.
And when people tell me I'm too nice, and definitely I'm not, but I understand what they're saying in one area of my life when they say that. And I think, wow, I'd rather be that than somebody tell me I'm too mean. And but I do have a question for you though. Absolutely, Shelley, is that so? We've got this boomer. I'm kind of like, people bug me all the time. I don't know if I'm a Gen X or a boomer. I'm somewhere in the middle of that. But I grew up with my very first computer when I was 24, and it was, a computer. So that would mean that I have how many years of experience on computers? That would make it like 34. But yet,
Yeah.
because of my age, people still perceive me as being technologically
Challenged.
challenged just because of my age. Because I know that the younger people, and I've kept up with it the whole time. So sometimes I get, and you're talking about the judging, right? But I know that they're judging me on my age and this, and it disturbs me, and it shouldn't, but it does. So what would you speak to that? Because you're talking about the judgment and stuff like that, but how would you respond to somebody who's telling you, let's say they're in your group and going, my age is causing me grief because people are not accepting me for my intelligence and my knowledge. And they're looking at the 20 and 30 and 40-year-olds. I can tell you, I'm more advanced than a lot of them out there. So
Oh, I definitely have some stories for you. First of all, ageism is absolutely real in the career search.
Mhm.
It is absolutely real. And that perception of technologically challenged, I mean, I'll be the first to admit I may not know all of the new CRMs and all of the latest gadgets. And so that's when I actually pull in an iGen or a millennial to do a reverse mentorship with me. And what I mean by reverse mentorship is that, let me give you an example. When I was at Lockheed Martin, I was in charge of this big, huge workforce planning, right? What are we going to do with all the people retiring, going off programs, etc. I'm like, I am not a math person. So that limiting belief, I'm not an engineer, right? But I am smart enough to know that I need help with this. So I asked one of my employees who was 27, who was like, you've never seen Excel spreadsheets like he could do in your life. So I asked him to mentor me. I let him speak to the CEO. I put him in front of people and I mentored him, and he was promoted time and time again, right? He helped me understand the story. And I think part of that is being able, so that's an example of a reverse mentorship. I have another story of one of my clients who is 65. She's energetic, fun, right? But everybody should retire at 65. Well, she's like, I don't want to do that. I really don't want to do that. So we helped her get 2 offers in one day from 2 competing industries. And she did that by on the phone, networking, finding pain points, and proving her value proposition to get over that ageism piece where she beat out lots of people that are millennials and Xers like me, right? But ageism is absolutely real. And there's so many stereotypes out there, especially with like technological startups. Um, I'm not going to name specific companies, but like I have friends and they're 42 and they're like the oldest in the business.
Yeah.
So a lot of people I work with a lot of very successful people in their 50s and 60s. I just got a COO, and he has 3 avenues. I either get a job, I do consulting, or I help my son, who's a Salesforce guru, to build his business. And I learned Salesforce, and he's 62 and he rides 80 miles a day on the bike, right? So any of the millennials or iGens that are listening to this, do not judge based on age. I'm I'm a Zumba instructor. I have over 25 years of experience. I probably have more energy than your parents or you. right? So ageism is a state of mind, and people are living longer. And be open enough to listen to when people are talking, because we actually do have more experience and you might learn something.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. I thank you for sharing that, because like I said to you, I'm very proud of my age. I'm excited that and the things that I can do and the things that I keep learning, because technology has been my life for the last 34 years. In fact, my ex-husband, I think one thing that bothered him, he'd want to buy me a ring or some jewelry, and I go, no, I want a computer. I want technology.
That's awesome.
It's technology.
That's awesome.
So there you go.
Yeah. Well, I worked for a company that there were, a lot of us were up in the 50s and 60s.
Yeah.
But we had all this experience. But the corporate decided, no, you need to hire guys out of college and then train them. So as we were retiring, they were getting kids out of college.
Yeah.
And they were bringing them in and training them, and so you've lost all that experience, or you're losing it.
Mm-hmm. Part of workforce management is what's called knowledge continuity or knowledge management. Is how do you incorporate all of that knowledge that's walking out the door, right? I'm not going to name names, but several technology companies, talent strategy for long term is to hire from universities, boot camps, etc., so that new blood comes in. And there are programs. You got me on a good topic, Roy. I can definitely talk all day about this. But a lot of people in their 40s and 50s are going back to boot camps. I have a fitness manager that went to a boot camp. She got a job in 3 weeks as a front end developer, making $80,000. I have a woman in Spain who is a coder, and before that, she was an English teacher, right? So people are, and things are changing. I will tell you, COVID has changed so many things. What used to be acceptable is not going to be acceptable anymore.
Yeah.
Demanding that people work 40 hours, 50, 60 hours a week. That's why Society of Human Resource magazine has predicted that 40% of people who were scared to leave during the pandemic are going to have an exodus in 2021 to 2023.
Yeah. Yeah.
That'll keep me busy.
When my son was in college, he was an electrical engineer.
Yeah.
And he said in his 4 years, they would have people from industry come in and talk to him, about electrical engineering and stuff. And,
yeah.
And he said one of them told him, with the technology changing as fast as it is, you may have to retrain 10 times in a 40-year working career just because of technology.
Oh, easily. I mean, think about it. Our cell phones, our smartphones, we used to have flip phones. And before that, we had these big boxes that we would bring up to our ear. And before that, okay, Lori, this is going to age me. You talked about computer. Like, do you remember the Pong, Atari?
Yes, I know that, and the Commodore kind of thing too.
Yeah. And then there was Miss Pac-Man and Pac-Man, and then there was like okay, I just aged myself. I love the 80s and the 70s.
And my first computer didn't even have a hard drive. There you go. And it had those big floppy disk things.
Oh my God. Do you remember those?
I love them. I still have even some of my 3.5. No joke. I still have them.
Yeah.
And I have a thing that I can go check and still, because I mean, that was a lifetime of stuff that we carried on, and I download them all, but I still keep them just for fun.
Exactly.
Well, Shelley, how can our listeners reach out to you?
Good question, Roy. Thanks. I am at careeradvantage.com, or I'm on LinkedIn under Chelle, Chelle, Michelle without the MI, Johnson, or I'm also on Facebook at Best You Career Advantage. And I get lots of followers. So those are the 3 best ways. Chelle Johnson at bestyoucareeradvantage.com.
Cool.
Thank you so much. This is really exciting. Like you said, we could probably go on for another 2 hours about this subject. This is great.
Exactly. So many subjects. Limiting beliefs and women in technology and like computer. Oh my gosh, we could.
Shelley, would you be interested in coming back later sometime?
I'd love to. I have lots of different stories that I can tell that I think your audience would really relate to, that helped me accept, forgive, get rid of those limiting beliefs, go back to Spain to do this walk across Spain. I did 150 miles in 5 days, and
Wow.
the message that I got from that. So yeah, sure. Thank you so much.
Thank you
Okay.
too. Really appreciate it.
Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Absolutely. Take care.
Ditto. Nice to meet y'all too.
All
Okay,
right,
bye.
bye-bye.